Welcome to Shaman Sister Sessions, episode 30, Lunar Cycles of Power. I'm Michelle Hawk, and I'm here with my shaman sister, Catherine Bird, and this is our offering to you. This podcast came about through our conversations about spirituality, shamanism, what it means to be a healer and an empath in the world. We've known each other for a few years now and had all of these amazing discussions and decided why not make it available to you, the public, also healers and practitioners or soul seekers among us. So thank you so much for joining us here today. Today is our episode 30. And actually this is the first episode of my 30s. I just had my birthday last week. And today we're speaking about something that is very near and dear to my heart and very essential component of my work, and that is the lunar cycle of power. So, Kat, how are you doing?
Amazing. Just coming out of a very intense ceremony weekend, so still integrating and re-regulating my system from that experience. But really happy to be here and chatting about cycles of power again. And I'm so excited that you're 30 and I'm doing really well.
Yeah, fantastic. And I know also, you had ceremony over the weekend, Friday and Saturday are the big ceremony days, right? Mm-hmm. And on Friday, we also had that super juicy full moon. Speaking of lunar cycles of power, you were all lit up in this gorgeous Sagittarian container.
Yeah, it was bright. Mm-hmm. And even last night, the moon shining in the window was so bright and so powerful. And, I know for me, it's always so hard to sleep on the full moon. It just feels like so activating that there's usually about 3 days where I don't really sleep very well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And we'll delve into talking a little bit more deeply about what are some of the points to keep in mind when working with lunar cycles of power. But let's just touch briefly upon cycles of power in general. For those of you who missed last week's episode, we discussed solar cycles of power, what it means to work with the solar cycle in its expansion and contraction, and the death and rebirth cycles in the northern and southern hemisphere. And, we live in the northern hemisphere, so we're speaking about that, but everything still applies if you're in the southern hemisphere joining us from there. So cycles of power, let's give a little recap. Kat, do you want to chat about that for a second?
So when we're talking about cycles of power, everything has its cycles of power. Just the same as we do, as we go through our life, we have sort of these cycles of power where we have more power, more energy in certain times and periods of our life. And then we go through a death and then a rebirth phase as we are born again. And just the same as that, everything has a cycle of power, just the same as we can watch a plant grow and bear fruit and then go back into maybe a dormancy period or completely die altogether and create its seeds for the next generation. Everything has a cycle of power. Everything has a certain influence of time period, and they can be a huge cycle of power brought upon by a large body like a planet. They can be a very small cycle of power that's moving through quite quickly. And so as we are seeking to understand ourselves and to navigate the world in a way that's more easeful and to understand the way that things are coming up for us and often are coming up for the collective, then we can start to look at the cycles of power that are happening on a daily basis, a monthly basis, yearly basis, going through segments, maybe a few months at a time, the seasons that have certain cycles of power as they're moving through in the different areas where we live. and all of these awarenesses of cycles of power and their effects on our lives on a daily basis.
Mm-hmm. This is also really important to keep in mind when, working with not only our own energies, but the energies of whatever guides and teachers we might be seeking as allies. What are their cycles of power? How are they different or similar to our own? And how can we align our energies with them in a harmonious way in order to have that synchronistic amplification effect rather than working against conflicting cycles? So yeah, for more information, you can tune into our last episode, which I believe is up on our YouTube channel of the name Shaman Sister Sessions, for more information on solar cycles of power and cycles of power in general. So we're doing these episodes back to back with particular intention because these two luminaries, these are the sun and the moon, the biggest sources of illumination and amplification that we have available to us on Earth. So last week, again, speaking about the solar cycles of power, we barely touched upon the association with the masculine and the different aspects of that, but that is absolutely a component of working with solar energy. And when working with lunar energy, we have other cycles of power that work on different scales in association with our inner feminine. And let's talk a little bit about, do you have anything in particular that I know you said you have a hard time sleeping for a few nights around the full moon? Anything come up for you around the new moon? And viewers, as you're watching this, or listeners, as you're calling in, go ahead and think about, have you ever noticed any particular themes for you around the new and full moon in particular?
Well, I was always taught that we, utilize our new moon time as where we're going to plant our seeds. Mm-hmm. And that if we plant our seeds of what it is that we're seeking to have come to fruition at that new moon, then we can watch it as it goes through that cycle, as the moon expands and grows, that our intention can expand and grow. And it gives a container for working on an aspect of ourselves where I'm utilizing the moon's energy and its natural cycle of power to bring power to an intention, a creation, something that I'm focused on having more of in my life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I usually try to do that work on the new moon, to focus in on what is this cycle of power going to be about for me.
Yeah, absolutely. Because and every new and full moon, so we're speaking about those as the two main points in the lunar cycle that are the poles, the extremes of that cycle of power. But we can also bring into, and we will bring in actually, as we're speaking about working with that cycle, the first quarter and the last quarter moon as well. But the new and full generally are when people notice things happening. There are more car accidents around the full moon than any other time of the month. There's, because there's a lot of activated energy. People have trouble sleeping. People have really intense dreams. I also have that around the new moon too, where I'll get these really big downloads of a lot of energy, especially in visions and dreams. And then I'll remember, oh yeah, we have the new moon tomorrow. That's why. And so I've definitely noticed that affecting my sleep as well. Not usually in having trouble sleeping, but in very active vision-oriented sleep.
Yeah, and even on the full moon, there are more murders. There are more people who are admitted into psychiatric care, mm-hmm. Suicides. Like, my mother worked as a psychotherapist, and she, it was always on the full moon. It was like people got, their illnesses picked up, and that concept of lunacy is quite true, that our psyches are highly tuned into the lunar frequencies.
Yeah, that word, even lunacy, right? The root of the word, or lunatic, right? If someone's a crazy person, a lunatic, then they're aligned with the lunar energies. right? Oh my gosh. So let's chat a little bit. You know, Kat, you planted the seed for us to be talking about planting the seeds of intention. Let's go there for a minute. So and this is something also working with the lunar cycle, I want to say, is something I do a lot in my, well, I mean, I hope it should be obvious in the New Moon Rising program, which is an intensive 3-month-long deep dive journey that I offer twice a year. My next New Moon Rising journey, it begins September 6th. And I do still have early bird pricing going on. If you're interested, you can contact me. But suffice it to say, it's 3-month deep dive into the lunar cycle, working really, really profoundly on some deep level stuff of healing. So one of the things that I teach as part of working with the lunar cycle in my New Moon Rising program is exactly that. It's what you were mentioning about planting the seeds of our intention, being aware of the lunar cycle of power, which does affect all of us. It affects all of us on Earth, you know, and women in particular have a really strong affinity with the lunar cycle due to our biorhythms of bleeding. But men are also affected by the lunar cycle. You know, men, if you're watching this, please don't think that this doesn't apply to you. It absolutely does. So planting the seed of our intention on the new moon is one of the best ways to really attune to what is going on in the cycles of growth and expansion and contraction with this main luminary, the moon. So at the new moon, which is actually the dark moon, that's how a lot of traditions refer to it, as the dark moon, because it is blackness and it appears as though there is nothing there. It is the void. It is the space of infinite potential, that which, you know, the fertile ground with which all is possible. So that's the most potent time to tune into what is your intention that you want to bring about. And there are a lot of ways of doing this. Kat, do you have any favorite ways of accessing new moon intention cycle planting?
So with my teacher, and the way that I was taught to work with the new moon is actually to work with a sacred bowl of salt, and to add in oils or herbs, something that is a representation of the intention, and to place that into the salt and stir it in, and make declarations of who I am, my name, my matrilineage, and place that intention into the bowl and stir it in, and then have that as out in the moonlight or non-moonlight, and
Right.
And then that is a focal point to be used in baths, or to be used to clean the hands on a regular basis, and to be bringing that intention and energy. Like, here now I have my intention. I'm placing it in this cauldron of a bowl, so very feminine piece. And then I can utilize this physical, tangible object and this white salt to cleanse and purify myself, and to keep drawing that awareness to that intention throughout the month, so that I'm remembering it, and keep using that same salt over and over. And then if you're using it for a group intention, everyone putting it in there, and everyone getting to keep part of the salt for the month. And then it's storing up all of these beautiful intentions over time.
That's a really beautiful way to, it's really easy, like, okay, I'm going to do a little ceremony, and then we kind of forget, right? But the intentions that you're planting on the new moon, they're there. The new moon, which is the planting, the first quarter moon is the flowering. This is where the seeds that we're planting, the trees are growing, and they're putting out the signs that growth is happening. This is the time when I really like to encourage my clients to drop into witnessing what's going on. as you have the first quarter moon, which actually looks like half of the moon. It's things are happening in regards to this intention that you planted for yourself. What are you noticing in terms of new energy, signs of life coming forward? Maybe things aren't fully manifested yet, but there are definitely some shifts going on. And that salt practice, Kat, I really love that you included that and offered that as a suggestion to our viewers, because that is a way of continuing the awareness, not just at these most heightened points on the poles, the new and the full moon, but all the way throughout, to continue to carry the strength of that intention and really nurture it.
So what do you do, Michelle? Like, what would be a way that you would plant that seed?
I do a lot of different ways of intentioning. A lot of what I like to do is related to sitting in deep meditation or deep prayer. In writing, I'll do some channeling for the new moon. It also depends on what sign the moon is for me. I do a lot of work with that as well. So there are many nuances, if it's, so our next upcoming new moon is June 23rd, and it's a new moon in Cancer. It's just right after the solstice. So my new moon intentions, actually, hey, that'll be while I'm visiting you. We can do some new moon intentioning together. But it'll probably include some water of the healing waters, because that is a big component of Cancerian medicine. So wanting to tune also to that's the moon is at home in Cancer. She rules Cancer too. So really looking at what intentions around safety and home and comfort and nurturing can I set for myself. Again, tuning to cycles of power, looking at what is the particular flavor of this lunar cycle, and how can the intentions that we set be really in alignment to be most expanded upon in that lunar cycle. For example, if I were to be wanting to set a really active intention about, I'm going to go out in the world and do a bajillion things and travel and talk to everybody, that would have been for last lunar cycle. And that was actually some of the intention I set for the Gemini lunar cycle. But that wouldn't necessarily be the most appropriate intention for this lunar cycle. I mean, it would receive energy, it would be expanded upon, but it's not necessarily the most comfortable fit for working with a Cancer new moon. So please keep that in mind as you're setting your intentions of what is the flavor of this particular lunar cycle, and how can you be in harmonious alignment in the best possible way with the cycle of power. So I didn't really answer your question. I do a lot of different things.
Yeah, and it can be. I mean, you did answer the question.
Gemini. You kind of garbled there for a second.
Yeah, you were garbled too, so we lost that. But I was just saying that you did answer the question in that we're looking at each new moon as its own being, its own cycle, like really not just it's the moon going through a cycle of up and down, but through the different signs of what is the energy that we're calling in, and then working with that, and then you bringing in a ceremonial practice that's going to be supported by that particular cycle of power, right?
I think I got what you said. Yeah. I kind of lost you for a minute in there, but each new moon has its own cycle in conjunction with the signs, in addition to the lunar cycle as a whole. Is that what you were saying?
Yes.
Yeah. Great. Absolutely. Right. So, viewers, please keep that in mind as you are planning your intentions about how can they be in harmonious alignment with the cycle of power that already exists there. Yeah. If you have questions about the best way to do that, that's something I include in my lunar newsletter. So you may want to consider signing up for that for ritual suggestions. I actually every month will offer new and full moon ritual suggestions for how to align your energies with that. So the first quarter moon is the flowering. We have the new moon, which is the planting of the seed. The first quarter moon out faith. This is the time where, again, when we continue to pour energy into these intentions and trust that they are unfolding.
Yeah, can you just repeat that?
Yes, the first quarter moon is the flowering. This is where we start to see our intention come into actualization in the world. And it's important to sustain the energy that we have pouring into this intention. It will work. I mean, intentions and magic do work if we're not paying attention to them. And yet they're even more powerful if we do focus some love and devotion and joy upon these intentions. So again, Kat, with the salt practice, that's a very appropriate way to continue to pour energy into your intention throughout the month.
Right. Or even if you're able to, actually planting real seeds in your garden. And this is another way that we can be tuning into this cycle of power and watching something grow and placing our intention in that seed as we plant it in the ground or, in a little pot, and then feeding it with the energy and our intention on a daily basis as we give it little drops of water and focus into like having an external object to bring focus to. It's often really important for us to be able to stay on track with something. And I also hold the encouragement. A lot of times we want so much stuff. Like we want to create a new, business thing, and we want our relationship to be good, and we want abundance, and we want a new house, and we want like all of these things that we want. And my encouragement is to keep it very simple. And you'll have another moon coming up shortly that you can bring something in for, but really just keeping it to just one thing and not making it all over the place, I think is very helpful when we're setting these intentions.
Yes. I've heard most of what you said, I think, is working.
Yeah, your side is really garbly.
All right. Well, you were too. So, all right. Speaking of intentions, planting a seed of intention for clear connection. Thank you. Thank you. Okay. So let's talk about the full moon now. Full moon is where this is the fruiting. If we're looking again at this plant metaphor, which is a very appropriate metaphor, we have planting the seed on the new moon, the flowering on the first quarter, and then we have the fruit on the full moon. This is where the beautiful, shiny manifestations of your intention are born, and you get to witness them. This is where you get to see, here is this gorgeous fruit, this fertile thing that is holding the energy of that intention, and actually getting to start to receive. That's where in the biggest container, the full moon is the biggest container to illuminate whatever energies. And here's where there is a little bit of alchemy that's going on too. Because again, the way that I practice working with the lunar cycle, the new moon really sets the tone for, okay, what sign are we in and how does that carry through the whole month? But the full moon is in the opposite sign. So for example, we have our next upcoming new moon, which is June 23rd in Cancer. The next upcoming full moon in that cycle is July 8th in Capricorn. Capricorn is opposite Cancer on the zodiac. And so Capricorn looking to not only what is the manifestation of those Cancer intentions that you set for yourself in the new moon, but also how are they illuminated by this opposite perspective? How are they reflected upon and enhanced and alchemized in this way by the magic of that full moon, which is in its own sign? So that's something that I really like to pay attention to as well. Not only how are the fruits of your intentions being born, but how are they given a new flavor and new context by this opposing and complementary element.
Yeah, very important.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, you know, a lot of the full moon is, you know, the new moon is a lot of reflection and going into the dark void, into that emptiness, into the unknown, you know, into that deep sitting, right? The sitting meditation. And the full moon is that space of, you know, ecstasy and dancing and, you know, playing the drum and singing and being in community, right? And having, you know, ceremonial works that are about celebration of the light, celebration of the illumination that we have access to. And also about, you know, calling that illumination into our being, whether that is being outside and maybe taking all our clothes off or laying in the window and receiving some of that lunar energy onto our bare skin, or, you know, being outside dancing under the moon, just going out and being outside under the moon. And also, you know, I really do try to get my crystals and helper objects out into the full moon for cleansing and purification and receiving light, because it's often a very important part of our work as healers, that we take care of our ritual objects in that way.
Yeah, the full moon is a really beautiful container for that. And it's funny, as you're saying that, I remember the last time I did that was about 2 years ago, because it's been a while. I have a lot of crystals, and Kat, you know, you've seen my healing space. It takes hours for me to move all of the things. So I haven't done it recently, but maybe I'll start doing small batch every full moon, do some components of them. Yes. And so with the full moon intention, it's so funny. I just want to reflect to you on about my last lunar intention that I set for myself, or the last couple lunar intentions. So with the Taurus new moon that we had a couple of months ago, my intention that I set for myself was beauty as a spiritual practice, really capitalizing upon the beautiful embodied magic of Taurus, the goddess embodied, and practicing what is beauty in all its manifestations, and how is beauty service to spirit and service to self-growth. So I enjoyed a really beautiful month, like literally a beautiful month, just being present in what is it like to adorn myself as a spiritual practice? What is it like to create my space? This worked really well because I had just moved. So I was beautifying and cleansing my new home space and creating a beautiful container in which to do my work and to connect with spirit. This last lunar cycle, the Gemini lunar cycle, I set my new moon intention around exploring, and well, not exploring, but expressing the part of myself that likes to tell jokes and be fun and go to parties and flirt, and all of the Gemini magic traveling around the world, because I tamp that part down a little bit in my spiritual practice. I've especially beginning my work as young as I did, slight suppression of my Gemini magic. So that was my intention, claiming for this Gemini new moon for my 30th birthday. And then Kat, you're talking about the celebration, the drumming and the singing and the dancing and the moonlight. That's exactly what I did for my birthday party. I had a fantastic, beautiful birthday party on the night of the full moon with all of my friends coming over and playing music in my driveway outside under the moonlight. It was gorgeous. So, yeah.
That's beautiful, Michelle. I'm so glad you got to do that.
Thank you. Yeah. So let's talk about the, do you have any favorite full moon rituals? Actually, you know, the beautiful salt one for the new moon, but you said about cleansing the tools. Is there anything in particular that you find yourself really called to do for this, or, well, I guess you did ceremony for this full moon, but is there anything else that really jumps out at you as important?
You know, one of the things also that I do is, you know, I work with a lot of feathers and owl energy, so it is very present for me and my wings, and so I will often take my owl wings out and, you know, fly them around for the full moon, and just be calling in that wisdom and magic that they bring in, the messages that they bring in, and that they assist me in my work. And so I'm using that that cycle of power of that full moon in conjunction with the cycle of power of the owl. And so by combining those two, I'm giving power, and I'm honoring this animal who they have this conjoined cycle of power with the moon. So I'm actually increasing and calling in more of that magic and medicine into my work by doing that as a ritual practice.
That's wonderful. That's a beautiful example for all of you tuning into this about working with a cycle of power, not only of one entity, but of multiple entities simultaneously. And how do they alchemize harmoniously together, or are they in disharmonious alignment? So please keep that in mind when you are calling in and working with multiple guides and energies at the same time. I love that. That's beautiful.
Right. And in the same vein of that, we talked about a bit about correspondences during our solar talk, but looking at the lunar correspondences. So working with stones of amethyst, stones that are a purple, wearing silver jewelry, you know, working with the plants which are held under lunar frequency, which are often plants that help us with sleeping and with dreaming. So lavender, passion flower, you know, any of the plants that have purple blooms, very succulent foods, so melons and things that have a round fruit are often lunar. Cabbages are very lunar. And it's sort of just having this consciousness within yourself of, oh, these are also within this cycle of power. So, you know, maybe I'm going to wear this as a sacred object that corresponds with this day.
Hi. There we go.
So just looking at, you know, what corresponds with the energies that we're working with, and how do we stack the energies that are together in order to have more focus, more energy towards whatever it is that we're working with or working on.
Yeah, and amplifying the cycles of power.
Yeah. Totally.
So let's talk about the last quarter moon, the third quarter moon. This is the time of the harvest. This is when we're integrating and reaping the beautiful fruits, you know, and actually is the, again, I threw out a lot of words there, so I want to repeat them back. This is harvest time. This is integration time. This is collection, really bringing in and taking part in, consuming, really receiving all of those intentions so that then you can prepare to enter another dark moon cycle and do it all again.
Yeah. And, you know,
That's it, basically. There we go. Hello?
Sorry, you keep going out.
Sorry.
So I don't know what's the what.
I don't either.
So we're just talking about the harvest cycle, the third quarter moon, and it's our element of harvest. And so what I would place in that realm is is really a gratitude practice for what it is that you have been calling in, as if it has already come to pass and is being harvested, even if it doesn't feel like it's truly there yet completely. And allowing yourself to maybe sit with I don't know if you got any of that, but really allowing ourselves to sit in that third quarter cycle in the experience of gratitude as if it has already come to pass and come to fruition, no matter what it seems to be representing on the physical plane, honoring the harvest point through expression of gratitude for what already is, even if it's not there.
Hello?
Yes.
Okay.
So I'm not sure how much of that I heard, if any of it at all. I'm assuming that it was.
Well, I couldn't really hear you, but I know kind of what you were saying about in that third quarter part of the moon. The lunar cycle is the time of gratitude. It's the time of receiving and sitting in the gratitude for the harvest. Basically, is that what you were saying?
Yeah. Even if it doesn't seem like it's there yet, we're going to sit in it and vision it as if.
Yes. Exactly. And really leaving space to be surprised a little bit, because sometimes these intentions manifest in ways that we don't expect, and detaching ourselves a little bit from the outcome. And this works with any manifestation practice, right? Is leaving space for spirit to mix things and better than what you were asking for. So I want to throw out a couple of dates for people to keep in mind. Again, we've referenced the next upcoming lunar cycles, but please keep in mind your next new moon that you have a chance to plant the seeds of intention on is June 23rd, new moon in Cancer, and then full moon July 8th, full moon in Capricorn. So that's the next one. Please keep that in mind, and start thinking about now what that summer solstice new moon, because it'll be a little bit extra juicy because it's so close to the solstice. It's really quite near that and receiving that energy as well. Let's talk a little bit about the lunar cycle of power. We've walked people through different ways of being in alignment with the lunar cycle of power, but why is it, I think it's important to note, why is it that the moon has such a big effect on us? And, because there's a lot, especially for women, again, in the cycle of menstruation, but this does have just as big of an effect on men. And so, yeah, let's explore that a little bit. Okay?
Yeah. Well, I mean, we could, obviously, the moon is our closest celestial body. It is moving with us as we move through space. It never goes away. It's always there, moving around us. It is intrinsically connected with our planet, affecting our tides and so many things that we probably aren't even aware of. Animals are highly affected by the moon and the lunar rhythms, and we know that its effects on water if it has an effect on the tides, on the large bodies of water on the planet, and we made up almost most of it, it's all water, then it would only come to make sense that the moon would highly affect our physical bodies.
Yeah, absolutely. That's the biggest component right there. This is, as I tell my participants in the New Moon Rising program, this is the biggest force of change that we have access to on our planet. Yes, there are many cycles of power. Yes, we're working with the solar cycle of power. We're working with the animal cycles of power, the plant cycles of power. All of these cycles of power are very rich and potent and hold so much potential for energy. And yet the moon, throughout all of human history, the moon has been the thing that is associated with change. People have been using in poetry and literature the moon and the phases of the moon as metaphors for change, because it was always understood to be this very alchemical container for death and rebirth. This is a very shamanic symbol, the moon, of she goes into the darkness and returns back to her full light every month. She exhibits death and rebirth every month. And as we are doing this work, actualizing deep shift and change, she is our biggest ally. So it's very important to, if we're doing this work at all, be understanding just how much support working with her cycle can offer, and how out of alignment it might feel if you're not really tuned into that, and maybe not even knowing why.
Yes. And, as a woman, there's lots of information out there, but having our menstrual cycles in alignment with the moon can actually greatly help with cramping and emotional issues and stuff that's coming up. And sometimes aligning with the moon really is just holding that as an intention and asking for that to happen, for our cycles to be more easeful, and to ask for them to align in with the moon. And I know usually I flip in the spring and in the fall of full moon, new moon, and that's actually something common. We can start to, as women, track ourselves and our cycles in relationship to what's happening on the moon, and discovering, how we feel in relationship to, what's happening in those two cycles, right? Our own personal cycle of power and that lunar cycle of power.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah, it's interesting. I used to be aligned with the full moon, and now I'm on the new moon. And I guess I hadn't really paid attention to exactly when that happened, but I'll have to go and look now that you mentioned the flipping back and forth. Okay. Wonderful. Well, any last pieces of advice that we have? Or, Kat, you have participated in my New Moon Rising program. Would you mind sharing a little bit just about the specifically the part of working with the lunar cycle that is a big component of this program? How did you find that really supporting your work and your practice?
Well, oh God, fabulous vocal. I hope it's on the recording. What I found in doing this work is that there were specific energy and frequency beings that I was working with, whether I was conscious of them or not, that when we broke down the work and started peeling apart as we were going through these lunar cycles, I could understand myself and the beings and that I was working with on a much deeper level. And then the processes, this expansion and contraction experience, oftentimes we're sort of like, I want this thing, I want this manifestation to occur. And we don't have a clear pathway toward that end result. And the end result actually requires a path of expansion and contraction that's going on throughout it. And so I found that working through this particular program gave access to both of those points of expansion and contraction, working with the specific energy, calling in a specific guide, and working with it in a way that either was expansive or more in that contractive feminine sort of going inside and being still with it. And in so doing, are able to have a greater result. The manifestation is more profound, it's more real, because it's not just, I'm going to expand my way to the end result. It's actually working through the cyclical patterns that we all have to go through in order to have true transformation. We think that transformation is sort of this straight line, and we often get really confused by the fact that transformation goes in a spiraling motion. And so then when we start to align it with the lunar cycle, we are aligning our transformation with that. And I truly believe it offers us a greater ability to have that end result, manifestation, transformation actually come to fruition and take place, because we're honoring the actual process that it takes to have great change and healing.
I love that.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah. Well said. Absolutely. I love also what you were saying about a lot of times we feel like, oh, if I'm not making this really linear, measurable progress, then progress isn't happening. And that's one of the temptations in working with cycles of power, is to how do I make myself, and I actually had someone ask me this at one point when we were speaking about cycles of power. They wanted to know how they could align themselves with cycles of power to always be on the high end of the cycle of power. And it was so funny. I'd never thought about that. I was like, well, it doesn't work that way. Is the whole point of a cycle of power is that we do have these contractive times to go inward and integrate the work and deepen it and cement it in, so that then when the next surge comes, we can be even bigger and more in alignment with that expansive nature. So the contraction is just as important in the cycle of power. It doesn't mean it's less powerful. It's not that the high points in energy are the only powerful times. These low points in energy, the inwards, yin, feminine, darkness points of energy, are just as powerful and just as necessary.
Exactly. For example, in our work together, we worked with the crone energy, and the crone is not. It is more of a feminine, dark, what we would consider kind of a contracted drop in energy in this different kind of way. So if we're always wanting to be at this level, working with these kinds of beings that kind of resonate at this frequency, we can miss out on very deep healing and wisdom and information that is, coming through our soul, working through archetypal energies or animal beings, whatever it is. We can miss that. For those of us that, for those of us who live in beautiful, sunny, Southern California or Hawaii or places like that, we feel and we know we miss that cycle of winter. We feel it on a soul level, and not to have access to that cycle of winter can actually cause us to, overexert ourselves and to kind of do too much in cycle. We should be more containing, resting, going inward, and being quiet with ourselves.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's really important to keep in mind, how are you being in harmony not only with the expansive parts of the cycle of power, but with the contractive ones as well. And again, it's not a bad thing to go inward and to be contractive. Even that word has kind of a negative connotation of like, oh, expansive is good, contraction is bad, because there's this tension implied. But really what are you doing is you are moving with the natural flow of energy, which does have both parts,
right?
And being just as important as the big, expansive, illuminated portions of the cycles of power, especially of the lunar cycle.
Right. And I even like to look at the word contraction, and how it's really in that space that we are creating our contracts, that we are clearing our contracts that we have maybe created in other lifetimes, or relationships. Like, we're clearing contracts that aren't serving us, and then we're instating those intentions are our new contracts that we're putting into effect, and we're writing the contracts, and then we get to see what happens as we live those contracts into being. And writing contracts is not easy.
Oh, right. That makes so much. What? Your contract what?
As writing contracts is not always like the easiest part of any experience, right?
Yeah. Right. And oh my gosh, I love that. That never occurred to me, and that makes so much sense. So, viewers, please keep that in mind. The contract. Great. There we go. I was asking any last pieces of lunar wisdom that we'd like to impart on our viewers.
I think what we say in every episode is self and just tracking yourself, being aware, using your journaling, using your own internal awarenesses to track what's happening on an external level and start to see what the effects are, and then utilizing those effects to enhance your life as possible.
Yeah. Great. I'm trying to think if there's anything else. I mean, we can talk about this forever, of course, but anything else? For some reason, I feel called to invite people to practice being uncomfortable.
To practice being uncomfortable.
That feels important. And there are going to be practice being uncomfortable is invariably, we all have our own energies that we're really comfortable with, right? But any part of working with a cycle, it's going to include parts that you're not comfortable with. So imagine you're someone, lost you for a second, going out into the expansive part of that cycle might be uncomfortable for you, or it might be pushing your edges a little bit, but it's okay to practice being uncomfortable, practice asking for support.
It's super garbly, Michelle. It's really bad today. So So it was super garbly and junky audio-wise today, but yeah, Michelle, it's not
raining.
It's raining.
No. Yeah, let's just wrap up. Okay.
So we are wrapping up, and with the suggestion of allowing yourself to be uncomfortable and ask for support. And if you do need support, please reach out to us at Shaman Sister Sessions at gmail.com. On our Facebook page, we would love to hear from you, to hear about how these cycles of power are affecting you, or about any topics that you would like us to address on the show. And Michelle's New Moon Rising program will begin in the fall. I highly, highly, highly recommend it. It is incredible and amazing. My Healer's Process course is beginning next week, which I also highly recommend. It is incredible and amazing in its own way. Totally different experiences, but both worth checking into. And please see our prior episodes on our YouTube channel, Shaman Sister Sessions. There are so many topics that we've been discussing, and we will see you again next week. And as we step into our solstice ceremonial work, and look forward to seeing you then. Bye, Michelle.
Hi. Okay, wait 1 second before we sign off. For those of you interested in chatting with me about the New Moon Rising program, to decide if this is for you, this beautiful card, which I will mail to you, this I Claim My Sacred Work affirmation, New Moon Rising, gorgeous card, so that you can of your sacred work, since that is the theme of this fall's New Moon Rising journey.
I don't know if I got that, but if you are interested in Michelle's New Moon Rising experience, please reach out to her and she will mail you a beautiful card on your sacred work. And it's definitely worth having a conversation with her around this, because this can completely up-level your work in your life and where you're coming from, the sacred work that you're here to do on this planet. We really need you to step up, and this is such an incredible supportive way to make that happen. So,
all right. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.